My name is Roslyn, though everybody in Hartsboro just calls me Roz. And at 7 years old, I thought I had finally learned how to read people. Then one Friday night, my daughter-in-law posted a photo of a dinner I was not invited to, with a caption about family. And when I zoomed in on that beautiful table, I saw something on it that stopped my heart cold. Because I recognized it. I had made it with my own two fans. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments. For 35 years, I fed this entire town. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest, because the rest only makes sense if you know who I was first. I owned a little bakery on Maple Street called Honey and Rye, cinnamon in the walls, flour in the floorboards, a screen door that slapped shut 1,000 times a day. If you grew up in Hartsboro, Vermont in the last 3 decades, I baked your birthday cake. I baked your wedding cake. I probably baked the loaves for your grandmother's wake and slipped an extra one into the box for free, because that is what you do for people you love. I sold the shop in 2022, when my knees finally filed their formal complaint, but I never really stopped. You don't stop being the one who feeds people just because you hang up the apron. That Friday in May, I was sitting in my armchair on the ground floor of the duplex I have owned for 30 years. I live downstairs. My son Theo and his wife Sloan live in the unit above me and have for 8 years now. I had a cup of chamomile cooling on the side table and a paperback open on my lap, the kind of quiet evening I have made my peace with since my husband Wendell passed in 2016. I am not a woman who wallows. I learned a long time ago how to be good company to myself. And then I opened Facebook. The first thing in my feed was not from Sloan. It was from her mother, Yvette. A photo of a long table in a backyard, strung with those warm little Edison bulbs, the kind that cost a fortune and make everything look like a magazine. Theo was there, my Theo, laughing with his head tipped back. Sloan was beside him, glowing in a cream-colored dress. Yvette, Sloan's sister, 2 cousins, a couple of friends I half recognized. Wine glasses up. Everybody mid-laugh, like somebody had just said the funniest thing in the world. The caption read, "Family, the only ingredient that matters." So grateful to have all my people under one sky tonight. I read it twice, the only ingredient that matters. Now I want to be honest with you because I promised you honest. My first feeling was not anger. It was a small, almost polite confusion, the way you feel when you walk into a room and forget why you came. I sat there holding the tablet and I thought, well, because 3 days earlier Sloan had told me about this dinner, sort of. She had told me the way you tell the mailman something, walking past, already gone. She had been halfway out the door with her keys jingling, and she said, "Hey, Roz, real quick, we're keeping Saturday super low-key, just immediate family. You know how it gets. The reservation's tight, and I don't want it to be a whole thing. No biggie. Cool?" And I had said, "Of course, honey. Keep it intimate. I get it. I did get it." Or I told myself I did. I told myself a tight reservation was a tight reservation. I told myself intimate was a fine word, and that I did not need to be at every single thing. I am not the kind of mother-in-law who needs to be at every single thing. I pride myself on that. But here is the thing about that photo that I want you to sit with, the way I had to sit with it. I looked at the table. I really looked at it. And in the center, on a wooden cake stand I happened to recognize because I sold the matching one at a craft fair in 2019, was a tall caramel layer cake with a burnt honey drizzle pooling down the sides and a ring of candied orange peel around the top like a little crown. I have a name for that cake. It is called the Hartsboro Gold. I invented it the winter Wendell got sick, when I needed something to do with my hands at 2 in the morning. The burnt honey is mine. Nobody in this town makes burnt honey caramel except me, because it is a pain in the neck, and you scorch about 9 batches before you get one right, and I am the only fool stubborn enough to keep doing it. That cake does not exist anywhere on this earth except out of my oven, and there it was. On the table I was not allowed to sit at the dinner that was family only. So let me tell you what had been going on, because this is where it stops being a sad story about a lonely old woman and starts being something else. About a year ago, Sloan started what she calls her brand. She is 36, she is sharp as a tack, and she has built herself a tidy little following online, doing what she calls elevated home entertaining and from scratch baking. Tablescapes, linen napkins folded like swans, videos of her pulling something golden out of the oven with the caption "Made with love in my kitchen." People eat it up. She has brand deals now, little ones, a stoneware company, a fancy butter. The thing is, my kitchen, the good oven, the deck ovens, the heavy mixer that could knead concrete, all of that lives in the storage space behind the old shop, which I still own and still pay the lease on. Sloan has a key. I gave her a key 2 years ago because she asked so sweetly and because honestly it made me happy. I thought, look at that. She wants to learn the family trade. I thought we were building something together. And the recipes. She would come down to my unit with her phone and say, "Roz, walk me through the lemon thing again." And I would. I would stand at her elbow and show her how to tell a custard is done by the way it whispers off the back of the spoon. I taught her the brown butter. I taught her the burnt honey. I taught her like she was the daughter I never had, because she does not talk to her own mother much, or so I thought, and some quiet, vain part of me loved being needed like that. Made with love in my kitchen. She was not lying exactly. It was made with love in my kitchen, with my hands guiding hers, and then somewhere along the way, just with my hands. I am not telling you this so you will feel sorry for me. I am long past wanting anybody's pity, and pity has a short shelf life anyway. I am telling you because I need you to understand the exact moment something in me turned over. It was not loud, it was not even hot. It was cold, and it was clear, like the first hard freeze of October when you walk outside and the air has teeth, and suddenly you can see for miles. For 5 years, ever since Theo and Sloan started getting tight on money, I had quietly carried this whole house. The property taxes on both units, the water, the electric, the heat, which in a Vermont winter is no small potatoes, let me tell you, I never said a word about it. Autopay out of my account every month, smooth and silent, because I did not want it to be a whole thing, to borrow Sloan's favorite phrase. I told myself that taking care of people is just what you do. I told myself that being needed was the same as being loved. It is not. I want to say that plainly, because it took me 67 years and a layer cake to learn it. Being needed and being loved are two different animals, and you can spend your entire life feeding the first one and starve the second one to death without ever noticing. Love asks how you are doing. Need asks what's for dinner. I sat in my chair for a long time. The tea went stone cold. Outside the window, the light went lavender and then gray and then gone, and the Edison bulbs in that photo kept glowing on my screen, warm and golden and closed to me. And then I did something I had never done in my life. I did not call my son. I did not cry. I did not type out one of those long, aching messages you write at midnight and delete at dawn. I tapped the little heart. I liked the photo. Family, the only ingredient that matters, and I gave it a thumbs up like the world's calmest woman. And then very slowly, with one finger, I left a single comment. I read it over twice to make sure it said exactly what I meant, no more and no less. And then I pressed post, and I set the tablet face down on the table, and I folded my hands in my lap. And within 5 minutes, my phone started to buzz, and it did not stop. The first 3 calls were Sloan, then Theo, then Sloan again, then a string of texts I did not read, the little gray bubbles stacking up like cordwood. I watched the phone light up and go dark, light up and go dark, on the table where I had set it face down, and I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt patient. I felt the way you feel when the bread is finally rising, and there is nothing left to do but wait and let it. 8 words. That is all I had written under that photo, under all those Edison bulbs and raised glasses. Then let the family pay the family's bills. I had counted them twice before I pressed post, the way you measure flour, no more and no less. 8 words set right below her caption about family being the only ingredient that matters, so the 2 lines sat together where everybody could read them side by side. I did not pick up. Instead, I got out of my chair, and my knees said their usual piece about it, and I walked to the little oak secretary desk in the corner where I keep my paperwork. I have always kept good paper. 35 years running a business teaches you that the people who survive are the ones who keep good paper. I pulled out a folder, a fat one, and I sat down at the kitchen table under the good light, and I started to write a letter by hand. I want to tell you what I had figured out sitting in that chair while the tea went cold. I had figured out that I was angry. Yes, but anger by itself is just weather. It blows through. What I had underneath the anger was something steadier, and it was this. I was tired of being the engine nobody can see. I was tired of being the reason the lights stayed on in a house where I was not welcome at the table. And I realized that I did not have to make a scene to change that. I did not have to scream or sue or storm up those stairs. I just had to stop. That is the whole secret, and nobody tells you. You do not have to burn the house down. You just have to stop paying for the gas. So the letter, I made it kind because I am not cruel, and I was not going to become cruel just because somebody handed me a good reason. But I made it clear. I wrote that effective the first of the month, I would no longer be managing the household finances on their behalf. For 5 years, I had been keeping the books for all of us, both units, every bill, and they had never once seen one because I paid them before they ever arrived in a mailbox. I wrote that I had canceled the auto pay. I wrote that the utility accounts for the upstairs unit would need to be transferred into their names. And I included the phone numbers to do it because I am not a monster. I just have a spine now. I signed it Love Roz because I did love them. That was never the problem. The problem was that love had become a thing that only flowed one direction, downhill, like water, like heat leaving a house with bad windows. I had just slid the letter into an envelope when I heard the footsteps. You learn the sounds of a house you have lived in for 30 years. I knew those were Theo's feet on stairs before he was halfway down, heavy and quick, two at a time, the way he came down them as a boy when he smelled cinnamon rolls. There was a frantic knock. I took my time, I capped my pen, I straightened the folder, and then I opened the door. My son stood there out of breath, his face flushed, his phone still glowing in his hand. Mom, he said. Mom, what the hell is this comment? Sloan is losing it. She's in the bedroom crying. Her whole family saw it. The comment's still up. Everybody's screenshotting it. You gotta take it down. Like, right now. I looked at him. My boy, 39 years old, a good engineer, builds bridges that hold up tons of weight every single day and cannot hold up a single hard conversation with his own wife. I'm not taking it down, I said. It's true. He blinked at me like I had started speaking French. He came inside without being asked, the way he always does, and he started pacing my little kitchen. It's not about whether it's true, he said. It's about, come on, Mom. You embarrassed her in front of everybody. You know how she is about her family seeing stuff. That's like her whole thing. You couldn't have just called me? Did anybody call me? I asked. Did anybody call me before they sat down to a family-only dinner with my cake on the table? That landed. I watched it land. He stopped pacing. What? He said. What cake? The Hartsboro Gold, Theo, the burnt honey caramel. The one in the middle of the table in the photo. That's my recipe. I created it the winter your father was sick. Sloan served it to your family at a dinner about family, and I was not on the guest list, but my cake sure was. He opened his mouth and shut it. He is a smart kid. I watched him do the math, and I watched him not like the answer. She made that one, he said, but it came out weak, a guess, not a fact, and we both heard it. I think she ordered it, I said, gently. From Dot, my old partner, who still bakes part-time out of the shop. I had not confirmed it yet, not for certain, but I knew it in my bones, and Dot would tell me so 2 days later when I called her, sounding guilty as a cat, saying she had not known what the cake was for. She ordered it and picked it up and put it on a cake stand, and I sold at the Maple Street Fair and served it to her mother. And that's fine, honey. People order cakes. But then don't post about the only ingredient that matters and leave the baker downstairs. He sat down hard in a kitchen chair. He scrubbed his hands over his face the way Wendell used to. Okay, he said. Okay, that's not great. I'll talk to her. I'll have her order a different one next time, or whatever. Just, can you delete the comment, please? You're blowing this up into a whole thing. A whole thing. There it was again, that phrase, the family phrase, the one they use to shrink anything that asks something of them. I almost laughed. I'm not blowing anything up, I said. I'm tidying up my paperwork, and I handed him the envelope. He looked at it like it might bite. What's this? Read it, I said. He read it. I watched his eyes go down the page. and I watched the floor drop out from under him about 2/3 of the way through. He looked up at me, and for the first time that whole night, he was not performing being upset. He was just genuinely scared. Wait, he said. Mom, wait. You're canceling the auto pay? Like all of it? The taxes, the heat? The heat for your unit. Yes, I said, starting the first. I'll keep paying for mine since I'm the one who lives in it. You two will need to set up your own accounts. The numbers are right there. Mom, we can't, he said, and his voice cracked in the middle of the word, a 39-year-old man's voice cracking like a boy's. We didn't budget for that. We're stretched so thin already, you don't even know Sloan's brand eats money. It doesn't make it yet, and my last raise wasn't, we can't absorb that right now. And there it was, the thing under the thing. I want you to hear how my heart broke a little, even then, even angry, because that right there was my son telling me the truth for the first time in 5 years. And the truth was that they had been drowning quietly the whole time. And instead of letting me be a mother out loud, they had just let me bail the boat in the dark and pretended they had it handled. They had taken my help and resented needing it and excluded me to feel like they did not. I have seen it before. Pride is an ugly thing when it gets backed into a corner. I know you can't absorb it right now, I said, and I sat down across from him. I know, baby. I've known for 5 years. I do the books, remember? I've watched it the whole time. He stared at me. Then why, he said. Why now? Why like this? Because I said, and I had to take a breath before I could get it out steady. Because I finally understood that you'd rather have my money than have me. And a person can live with a lot, Theo. But not that. I'm done being the bank you're embarrassed to invite to dinner. The front door opened upstairs. I heard it, and so did he. Heels on the landing, then on the stairs, fast and furious, Sloan. She came through my door without knocking, which she had stopped doing years ago, treating my home like a hallway in her own. Her face was blotchy from crying and rigid with something harder than crying. This is messed up, she said. Her voice was shaking. This is like actual blackmail, Roz. You can't just yank the money to control us. Take the comment down and let's talk like adults. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I had taught to fold a custard. This woman I had loved like the daughter I was never given. Sweetheart, I said, and I kept my voice as soft as I keep it for skittish children at the bakery counter. It's not blackmail, it's just the bill. You wanted family only. Okay. Then the family pays the family's bills. That's not control. That's just the check coming to the table. She had no answer for that. I watched her not have one. And in the space where her answer should have been, I saw something flicker across her face, fast gone almost before it arrived. And it was not anger, it was fear. The same fear Theo had, a deeper, older fear, the kind that lives in the body, and I filed it away because I did not understand it yet, and a baker learns to notice the thing she does not understand yet. She grabbed Theo's sleeve. We're done here, she said, and she pulled him toward the door. But here is the part I did not expect. At the threshold, she stopped. She turned around and she looked at me, and very quietly, almost too quietly for Theo to hear, she said something that has stayed with me ever since. You always do this, she said. You make everybody need you, and then you make them sorry for it. And then she was gone, up the stairs, the door slamming above me, hard enough to rattle the cake stand on my shelf. I sat at my kitchen table in the sudden quiet. Make everybody need you, and then make them sorry for it. That was not the line of a woman who simply did not like me. That was a line with a whole history behind it, a history that had nothing to do with me, and I knew it. The way you know a recipe is hiding one ingredient you cannot name. It would be only a few more days before I learned whose voice she was really quoting. A few more days before I found out who had spent the last year, quiet and patient as rising dough, teaching my daughter-in-law to push me out the door. And when I found out, it changed everything. Because it turned out the dinner I was not invited to was never really Sloane's idea at all. But that is the next part of the story. For the first few days after that night, the house above me went strangely silent. No heels stomping across my ceiling. No music. No Sloane on the phone in that bright performing voice she uses for everybody but me. Just the small creaks of two people moving carefully, the way you move when you know the floor might not hold. I will be honest about what that silence did to me. By day, it felt like freedom. I woke up Saturday morning and made one egg for one person and ate it slow, and the sheer lightness of it nearly made me laugh. No big grocery run. No stocking the basement fridge with Sloan sparkling water and the good steaks Theo likes. No mental list of what everybody upstairs might need. Just me and an egg and a long, quiet morning that belonged to nobody but myself. But by night, I will tell you, it was harder. Because the quiet had a shape, and the shape was the family I used to have. Then Sunday came. You have to understand what Sunday meant in this house. For 30 years, Sunday was mine, but mine in the way a holiday is the church's, a thing I belonged to as much as it belonged to me. I would be up before 6. Rosemary and garlic in a roasting pan, bread proofing under a towel, the whole downstairs warm and gold with the smell of it. Theo grew up on those on Sundays. And after he married Sloan, those Sundays got bigger, not smaller, because Sloan started inviting people. Her sister, her cousins, friends from her old job, sometimes her mother. They would come down to my table and let me serve them, plate after plate, and they would laugh at jokes I was too busy in the kitchen to hear. And at the end, somebody would say, "Roz, you've outdone yourself," and that was my whole payment. And I told myself it was enough. This Sunday, I did not get up at 6. I slept until 8, which for me is practically a vacation. And then I did something I had not done on a Sunday morning in 3 decades. I took a long, hot shower. I put on the green dress Wendell always liked, the one I had not worn since his funeral because I could never find an occasion big enough. I put on lipstick. I stood in front of the mirror, and a woman I had not seen in a long time looked back at me. And she was not furniture, and she was not a bank, and she was not a kitchen appliance that happened to love you. She was just a woman in a green dress on a Sunday. I had booked a table for one at a little farm-to-table place out by Caspian Lake, the kind of spot I had driven past 100 times and never once stopped at because there was always a roast in my own oven. At 11, I backed my car out of the driveway, and as I did, I glanced up, and there was Theo at the upstairs window looking down at me, confused. The smell of rosemary should have been filling the whole house by then, and it was not, and he did not understand why, and I watched the not understanding move across my son's face like a cloud across a field. I gave him a little wave, and I drove away. I spent 3 hours at that lake. I had a glass of cold white wine in the middle of the day, like a woman with somewhere better to be, which I did not, and that was the whole point. I had trout that somebody else cooked and somebody else carried to me and somebody else cleared away. And when the waitress said, "Can I get you anything else?" I almost cried because I could not remember the last time a person had asked me that and meant me. I walked along the water afterward. The lake was doing that thing lakes do in late May in Vermont, throwing the whole sky back up at itself. And I stood there and breathed and felt my own ribs move. And I thought, this is what it is. This is the thing I traded away one Sunday at a time for 30 years and called it love. I want to tell you it was uncomplicated. It was not. Because that night, alone in my bed, the freedom thinned out, and underneath it was grief, plain and cold. I lay there and I thought about Sloan the way she used to be. There was a time, the first 2 years, before her brand and before whatever soured between us, when she would come down to my kitchen on a weeknight just to sit, just to be near the warm and the flower smell. She would perch on a stool and tell me about her day, and once, only once, late after wine, she told me a little about growing up, about a mother who measured a daughter's worth in how thin she stayed, and how the house looked, and what the neighbors thought, about being made to feel that love was a thing you earned by performing and lost the second you stopped. "You feed people, Roz," she said to me that night. "You just feed them. You don't make them audition for it." I had forgotten that. I had let the last few years bury it. But lying there in the dark, I remembered the look on her face when she said it, and I understood for the first time that the woman who had just called my comment blackmail and the girl who had said you don't make them audition for it were the same person. And something had happened in between, and I did not yet know what. I almost went soft. I lay there and I almost talked myself into going upstairs in the morning, deleting the comment, turning the auto pay back on, putting the apron back on, making small, small again, because small is warm and small is familiar and small does not have to feel this lonely at midnight. And then I made myself say it out loud. In the dark, the way you have to say the true things out loud sometimes, or they slip away. Being needed is not the same as being loved. I said it twice, and I went to sleep. The next morning is when Yvette came. I should have known it was coming. There is a kind of person who cannot stand it when the thing they have been quietly steering finally jerks the wheel out of their hands. And Yvette Renner is that kind of person all the way to the bone. She knocked on my door at 9 sharp, dressed like she was meeting a banker, every silver hair in place, and she had a look on her face I recognized from 35 years behind a counter. It was the look of somebody who has come to put you back in your place and is very much enjoying it in advance. Rosalind, she said when I opened the door, we need to have a talk, woman to woman. I let her in. I even put the kettle on, because my mother raised me right even when the company does not deserve it. And Yvette sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Sloan once told me you don't make them audition for it. And she folded her manicured hands and she started to teach me my lesson. I'm going to be frank with you, she said, because somebody has to be. You've made things very difficult for those kids. Sloan is beside herself. And I think it's time somebody reminded you of the situation here. You're a 67-year-old widow rattling around in a house that's frankly too much for you. Theo is your only family. Do you really want to spend the years you've got left picking fights over a utility bill? Pushing away the only people who'll be there at the end? I poured the tea. I did not say anything yet. I have learned that the most useful thing you can do with a person like Yvette is let them keep talking. Because they always, always say more than they mean to. You should be grateful, she went on, warming up now. Honestly, Rosalind, those kids let you be part of their lives. They include you. And this is how you repay it, with public humiliation, with these games about money. You know, my Sloan has built something beautiful, that brand, that following, and you're jealous of it. That's what this really is. You can't stand that she became somebody. You want her to need you. You make everybody need you, and then you make them sorry for it. And there it was, the exact words, word for word. The line Sloan had thrown at me at my own front door a few days before, the line that had been rattling around in my chest ever since. You make everybody need you, and then you make them sorry for it. Sloan had not been describing me. Sloan had been quoting her mother. She had been handed that sentence so many times growing up that it had worn a groove into her, and the second she felt cornered, she reached for it and threw it at the nearest older woman, and that woman was me. I set the teapot down very gently, and I looked at Yvette Renner across my kitchen table, and the cold, clear feeling came back, the October feeling, the one where suddenly you can see for miles. I understand now, I said. Understand what? She said. I understand who's been running this, I said. The dinner, the family only. The slow freeze over the last year. That was never Sloane's idea, was it? That was yours. You've been working on her this whole time, whispering. Because you couldn't stand it either, could you, Yvette? You couldn't stand that the person quietly keeping that whole household afloat, paying the taxes and the heat and the lights, was me and not you. You wanted to be the matriarch, and you can't be the matriarch while the other grandmother's name is on every check. Her face did a thing I will remember for the rest of my life. The performance fell off it, just for a second, the way a mask slips, and underneath was something raw and furious, and, I realized, frightened, because I had said the true thing out loud, and the true things have a power once you stop being afraid to say them. That is ridiculous, she said. But her voice had lost its starch. Is it? I said. Then tell me this. You sat at that table. You posted that photo. Family, the only ingredient that matters. And in the middle of that table was my cake, Yvette, the Hartsboro Gold, my recipe that Sloan ordered from my own old partner and passed off as hers. Did you know that? Did you sit there and eat my cake at a dinner about family and let them keep me downstairs? She did not answer, but her eyes flicked away just for an instant toward the window, and that flick told me everything. She had known. Of course she had known, and the knowing had been part of the pleasure. I want to tell you I felt triumphant. I did not. What I felt, Sitting across from that hard, frightened woman was something closer to sorrow, because I was beginning to see the whole shape of it now, the way you finally see a recipe whole once you find the missing ingredient. Yvette had spent a lifetime teaching her daughter that love is a performance and need is a weakness, and the only safety is in being the one on top. And Sloane had learned it, and I had walked right into the middle of it. The warm grandmother, the one who fed people without making them audition, and I had become a threat just by being kind. But there was something else I was beginning to see too. Something about that brand of Sloane's, the one Yvette was so proud of. Because I do the books, remember. I had kept the household accounts for 5 years, and numbers do not lie. And lately the numbers upstairs had been telling me a story I was only just starting to read. That beautiful brand. The linen napkins and the from scratch baking and the made with love in my kitchen. I was about to find out exactly what it was really made of. And it was going to turn out that the most expensive thing in that whole house was the lie that they had it handled. Yvette left my kitchen that morning without finishing her tea. She gathered up her purse and her dignity, what was left of it, and she told me at the door that I would regret this, that family was all anybody had at the end. As if she had not spent the last year teaching her own daughter to whittle a family down to the people who flatter you. I closed the door behind her and I stood in my quiet kitchen, and I did not regret one single thing. But what she said about the brand stuck with me. The way a splinter sticks, working its way deeper the more you ignore it. So that afternoon I did what I do. I sat down with the books. For 5 years I had managed the money for this whole house, both units, and that meant I saw things. I saw the credit card statements that came addressed to me because I was the one who paid them. I saw the auto payments to the stoneware company and the linen company and the photographer Sloane hired to shoot her tablescapes. I had never added it all up before, because adding it up would have meant admitting what I was looking at. But that afternoon, I added it up. Sloane's brand, the beautiful brand, the one her mother was so proud of, the one that was supposed to prove she had become somebody, was bleeding money. Badly. The brand deals were real, but they were small, a few $100s here, a box of free butter there. And against that trickle of income, there was a river going out. The props, the renovations to make the upstairs photograph well, the fancy ingredients, the subscription services. And underneath all of it, holding the whole pretty thing up like a foundation nobody could see, was me. My paid utilities, my free kitchen, my free childcare, my free groceries. Every dollar I quietly covered downstairs was a dollar they did not have to cover upstairs, which meant it was a dollar that could go toward making the lie look expensive. I sat there with the calculator and I understood, finally and completely. The maid with love in my kitchen was not just stealing my recipes. The whole brand, the entire performance of a successful young woman who had it all handled, was being financed by the grandmother in the basement they were too embarrassed to invite to dinner. I was not just uninvited from the table, I was paying for the table. I was paying for the centerpiece and the linen and the Edison bulbs and the very caption that cut me out. A normal person, I think, would have felt rage at that, and I did, a little. But mostly what I felt was a strange, sad clarity about what I had to do next, and it was not anything loud. It was the opposite of loud. I had stopped paying the bills. I had stopped keeping the books. Now I was going to stop doing all the other things, the invisible things. The 1,000 small unpaid jobs I had taken on so quietly over the years that nobody, including me, had ever counted them as work. I made a list. I am a list maker. And when I wrote it all out, even I was a little stunned at how long it was. I was the emergency contact on both of their phones and at June's preschool. I was the one the school called when June had a fever, because Theo was on a job site and Sloane was, as she put it, in a content window. I was the one who picked June up 3 afternoons a week and kept her until somebody came home, fed her, read to her, gave her a bath when they ran late, which was most days. I was the one who let Sloane borrow my car whenever hers was in the shop, which was often because they could not afford to fix hers properly. I was the one who watered the plants and took in the packages and let the contractors in and signed for things and was simply always there. The default, the fallback, The floor under the floor. None of it had a name. None of it had a price. It had just been for years what Roz does. And so, one by one, calmly, I stopped doing them. I want to be very careful about how I tell you this part, because there is one of those things I would never touch, and I need you to understand that I never did. I never stopped loving that baby. June is 5 years old. She has her grandfather's stubborn cowlick and a gap where her front tooth used to be, and she calls me Gam, has since she could talk, because she could not manage Grandma and Gam stuck. June did nothing wrong. None of what was happening was hers to carry. So when I tell you I stopped being the free childcare, I need you to hear exactly what I mean and what I do not mean. I stopped being on call. I stopped being the unpaid, unthanked, 24-hour daycare that let two adults pretend they had their lives handled. But I never once stopped being June's grandmother. I told Theo plainly, I will always make time for that girl. Call me, plan it, treat my time like it's worth something, and I am there for her every single time. But I am not your backup plan anymore. I am her grandmother. Those are different jobs. He did not fully understand the difference, yet he would. The first crack came on a Tuesday. June spiked a fever at preschool, and the school called me because mine was still the first number on the list. And I did something I had never done in 5 years. I told them gently that I was no longer the emergency contact, that they needed to call the child's parents. And I gave them the numbers. And I stayed on the line just long enough to make sure somebody answered. Sloan answered. I heard later that she had to leave a shoot, a real one, a paid one, and drive across town in a panic, and that she was furious. She came down to my door that evening, June asleep upstairs now, and fine, and she was vibrating. You took yourself off June's emergency contacts, she said. Are you serious right now? What if I hadn't picked up? What kind of grandmother does that? I looked at her, and here is where it could have gone the old way, the small way. The way where I apologize and fold and put my name back on every list, because the word grandmother is the one word that has always been able to make me kneel. But I had had a lot of quiet Sundays to think. The kind of grandmother, I said, who would drop everything in the world for that child, the second you ask her, like a person, in advance. You have my number, Sloan. You have always had my number. What you don't have anymore is the right to assume I'll be standing by, invisible for free, ready to catch whatever you drop while you post about how you do it all. I'm not a safety net. I'm her Gam. I'll show up for her with my whole heart. But you have to actually ask. And then, strangest thing happened. Sloan started to cry. Not the angry, blotchy crying from the night of the comment. Real crying, the kind that surprises the person doing it. And she sat down right there on my doorstep, this 36-year-old woman in her nice clothes, and she put her face in her hands, and she said something I did not expect. I don't know how to ask, she said. I don't know how to ask anybody for anything. If you ask, they know you can't do it yourself. And if they know you can't do it yourself, that's when they leave. I stood there in my doorway, and I felt the whole story turn over one more time. That is not a thing a person figures out on her own. That is a thing a person is taught, drilled into her young, by somebody who measured love in performance and treated need like a crack in the foundation that has to be plastered over before the neighbors see. I knew exactly who had taught her that. I had had tea with her that very morning. I sat down on the step next to my daughter-in-law. My knees protested, but I sat, and for a long minute I did not say anything, because some things do not want words yet. When did you find out? I finally asked. About the cake, the Hartsboro gold. You knew it was mine when you put it on that table. She was quiet for a long time. The crickets started up in the yard, and then she said, my mother told me to order it. From Dot. She said it would look better than anything I could make, and that nobody would ever know the difference, and that the whole point was that nobody knows the difference. She said that's what success is, looking like you have it handled. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, a young gesture, almost a child's. I used to love coming down here, she said. To your kitchen, you remember? You never once made me feel like I had to be impressive. You just fed me. And then somewhere, I don't know, Roz, I let her get in my head. She kept saying you were making me look small, that every time you cooked, every time you helped, you were proving I couldn't do it myself, that you were doing it on purpose. to keep me needing you. And I believed her, she said. I'm so sorry. I believed her, and I let her talk me into cutting you out of a dinner in your own house that you paid for, and I served your cake at it and called it family. I want to tell you that I forgave her on the spot, that the music swelled and the credits rolled. It does not work like that, and I will not lie to you and say it did. There was too much underneath, a year of it, really, and forgiveness that comes that fast is not forgiveness. It is just exhaustion wearing forgiveness clothes. But I did something. I reached over and I took her hand, the way I used to, when I was teaching her to fold a custard, when I would put my hand over hers on the spatula and slow her down. Gentle, Sloan, I would say. You're rushing it. Gentle. Listen to me, I said. Your mother is wrong. She has been wrong your whole life, and she taught you the wrong thing so well that you built a whole brand out of it. Feeding people is not how you trap them. It is how you love them. The cake was never proof you couldn't do it yourself. The cake was just a cake, and you never had to earn a place at my table. You never had to audition, not once, not ever. She looked at me, and her face cracked open, and for 1 second she was that girl on the kitchen stool again, the one who had told me you don't make them audition for it before her mother finished the work of making her forget she ever believed it. We sat on that step until the porch light came on by itself. It was not fixed, not even close. There was still the matter of a house, and a lease, and a marriage that had its own rot to deal with, and a mother upstairs in Sloane's head, who was not going to give up her grip without a fight. But something had moved, the first real thing in years, and I will tell you, I went to bed that night thinking the hardest part was behind us. I was wrong about that, because there was one more thing I had not found yet. One more piece of paper sitting in a drawer upstairs. That was going to test everything I thought I had just won. And when I found it, 2 days later, it was going to be the closest I ever came, in this whole long story, to walking up those stairs and never speaking to my son again. It was a Thursday when I found it, and I found it by accident, which is how you find the things that change everything. June had a half day at preschool, and Sloan, true to the thing we had started on my doorstep, had actually called me the night before. Called me like a person, and asked would I watch June for a few hours Thursday afternoon. And she said, please. And she said, thank you. And she said, I know it's a real ask. I nearly wept into the phone. So Thursday, I went up to their unit to grab June's booster seat, which lived up there. And Theo had texted me where the spare key was because nobody was home yet. The booster seat was in the front closet, and on the shelf above it was a stack of folders, the loose domestic kind every household has, mortgage stuff and warranties and old tax returns, and one of them had slid half off the shelf and spilled, and I am a tidy woman. I cannot help it, so I crouched down to gather the papers up. And that is when I saw my own name. It was a legal document. I have seen 10,000 of them in my life because I ran a business, and I know a deed when I am looking at one. It was a quitclaim deed, and it had been drawn up already, typed and formatted and dated, just waiting. It transferred the duplex, my duplex, the house I have owned for 30 years, the house Wendell and I bought when Theo was just a boy, from Roslyn A. Whitlock to Theodore and Sloan Whitlock as joint tenants. There was a line at the bottom for my signature. It was blank, but everything else was filled in. I knelt on my son's closet floor with that paper in my hands, and I could not breathe because I understood what it was. A quitclaim deed is the simplest, fastest way in the world to sign your house out of your own hands and into somebody else's. And the reason it is so simple is that it asks no questions and offers no protection. You sign it, you are done. The house is theirs, and there is no taking it back. Somebody had drawn this up. Somebody had picked the language and filled in the names and put a date on it. Somebody had been planning to put this in front of me, probably warm, probably gentle, probably wrapped in soft words about estate planning and making things easier and avoiding probate, words designed to make a 67-year-old widow pick up a pen without reading too closely. And the worst part, the part that put me on the floor, was that I knew it would have worked. 3 months ago, before the photograph, before the cake, before the quiet Sundays, if my son had sat me down at my own kitchen tables and said, Mom, sign this. It just makes things simpler for everybody. It's all going to be yours anyway. I would have signed it. I would have signed it without a second look because I trusted them, because I wanted to be useful, because I wanted so badly to still be family that I would have signed my own house away to prove it. I do the books. I know exactly what people do to old people who sign things to prove they are loved. I do not know how long I knelt there. Long enough that I heard the car in the driveway, two doors, June's high little voice, footsteps on the stairs. And I made a decision in those few seconds that I am still, to this day, not entirely sure was the right one, but it is the one I made. I folded the deed in half and I put it in my cardigan pocket, and I stood up and I had June's booster seat in my other hand. And when the door opened, I was just a grandmother, holding a booster seat, smiling, and inside I was somewhere very cold and very far away. Gam, June shouted and barreled into my legs, and I picked her up, and over the top of her head I looked at my son. And here is the thing I had to sit with, the thing that nearly took me up those stairs forever. I did not know who had done it. I did not know if Theo had drawn up that deed, or if Sloane had, or if it was Yvette working the strings the way she worked everything. I did not know if my son was a thief, or just a coward standing too close to one. And the not knowing was its own kind of grief, because to even hold the question, is my boy the kind of man who would do this to his own mother, was to lose something I could not get back, whatever the answer turned out to be. I took June downstairs to my unit and I gave her crackers and put on her show, and I went into my bedroom and I sat on the edge of the bed with that folded paper and I shook. I want to tell you something true about that hour, because it is the most honest hours in this whole story. I came very close to becoming Yvette. I sat there and I felt the cold clarity start to curdle into something else, something with a taste to it, and I thought, fine, fine. If this is the game, I know how to play it better than any of them. I have paper they have never seen. I have records of every dollar. I could go to a lawyer and make their lives a misery. I could make Theo choose, publicly, painfully, between his mother and his wife. I could win so completely that there would be nothing left of them to lose to. I sat on that bed, and for 1 full hour I was not a grandmother, and I was not a baker. I was just a woman who had been wronged and knew exactly how to wound back, and the wounding felt, God help me, good to imagine. And then June laughed at something on the television in the other room. Just laughed. That gap-toothed, full-body 5-year-old laugh at some silly cartoon in the next room, in my house, safe. And it cut clean through the cold thing in my chest, because I realized that every single path that felt good to imagine ended with that little girl in the wreckage of it. There is no way to burn down two parents that does not rain ash on the child between them. Yvette had never once in her whole life stopped to ask that question. That was the entire difference between us, and I was about to throw it away to feel powerful for an afternoon. So I did not. I stood up. I washed my face. I went and sat on the floor with June and watched her cartoon and let her explain the whole plot to me in the wrong order, and I waited until Sloane came down at 5 to pick her up, and I said nothing about the deed. Not yet. I needed to know who, and I needed to do it in a way that left a door open instead of a crater. That evening I texted Theo. Just him. Come down after June's in bed. No Sloane yet. Just you and me. He came down looking nervous, the way he always looks now, and I sat him at the kitchen table, and I put the folded deed on the wood between us, and I smoothed it flat with my hand, and I watched his face. I have watched my son's face his entire life. I watched it when he was lying about a broken window at 9, and then I watched it when he told me his father had died, and I watched it on his wedding day, and I know every single thing it can do. So when his eyes hit that paper, I knew before he said a word that he had never seen it before in his life. The color went out of him. What, he said, what is this? Where he picked it up, his hands not steady, and he read it, and I watched the meaning arrive. Mom, I didn't. I have never seen this. I swear to God. I swear on June. Where did you get this? Your closet, I said quietly, this afternoon. It fell off the shelf. He stood up so fast, the chair scraped. He was breathing hard. He read it again like the words might rearrange themselves into something innocent. And then he said, in a voice I had not heard from him since he was a boy, Sloane. And then worse, slower, his face changing, her mother. He sat back down. He put the paper on the table like it was hot. Mom, he said, I need you to believe me. I did not know about this. I would never. This is her mother's thing. This is exactly the kind of, oh my God. He pressed his palms into his eyes. Yvette has been on Sloan for months about the estate, about getting things settled, and I told them to drop it. I told them it was morbid and weird, and you'd think we were after the house. And they said, okay. They said they dropped it. And the whole time, this was just sitting in my closet waiting. I believed him. I want you to know that I believed him completely because I had watched his face, and his face does not lie to me. It never has. My son was not a thief. My son was something that in this family had turned out to be almost as dangerous. My son was a man who kept the peace by not looking too closely, and a man who does not look too closely is a man in whose closet terrible things can sit and wait. There is something I need to tell you, he said then, and his voice was wrecked, about June. And it's going to make you angry, and you have every right. What? I said. She's been saying things to June. Yvette, he could barely get it out. June told me last week. Out of nowhere, she asked me if Gam was mad at her. And I said, no, baby, of course not. Why would you think that? And she said, because Grandma Yvette said Gam's too busy for me now, that Gam doesn't really want to see me anymore. I have been across one long life, lied to, cheated, betrayed, widowed, and excluded from a dinner in my own house. None of it, not one thing, ever hit me the way those words did. That woman had sat in my kitchen and drunk my tea and then gone upstairs and told a 5-year-old that her grandmother had stopped loving her, as a strategy, to pry the last warm thing loose so that when the deed came out and the family reshuffled, there would be no little voice asking where Gam went. I do not get angry the way other people do, I have told you. It goes cold, not hot. But this went all the way to the bottom of the cold, to a place I did not know I had. And I stood up from that table, and Theo looked up at me, scared. And I said the truest sentence I have ever said in my life. I am not signing anything, I said. Not that paper, not any paper, not ever. This house is mine until the day I die, and I am very much alive, Theo. But hear me now. I am done being whittled down by your wife's mother, and I am done watching you keep the peace by keeping your eyes shut. You are going to have to open them. Tomorrow. All the way, because tomorrow I am going to sit this whole family down at my table, the table she served my cake at, and I am going to tell the truth out loud. And you are going to have to decide finally in front of everybody which person at that table you actually came from. And he looked at me, my peace at any price boy, and for the first time in his adult life, he did not flinch away from the hard thing. Okay, he said. Okay, Mom, I'll be there. And I won't keep my eyes shut, I promise. I did not know yet if he could keep that promise. The whole story came down to whether he could. But that is the last part, and I will tell it to you now. I set the table the next evening the way I used to set it for the Sundays that mattered. Wendell's good cloth, the plates my own mother left me. I even baked, because I am who I am, and I do not know how to call people to a table empty-handed. I made a Hartsboro gold. My cake, my burnt honey, my hands, start to finish in my own kitchen this time, and I set it in the center of the table where everybody could see it, and I did not say a word about why. They came down at 7. Theo, pale and steady in a way I had not seen him before. Sloan, who knew something was coming and had clearly not slept. And Yvette, who I had asked Theo to invite without telling her what for, and who swept in like she owned the floor, took one look at the cake in the center of the table, and smiled, because she did not yet understand that it was not a peace offering. It was the evidence. I did not raise my voice. I have never once in this story raised my voice, and I was not going to start at the end of it. I put the deed on the table first. I smoothed it flat the way I had for Theo. Sloan went white. Yvette did not, which told me everything, because an innocent person is surprised by a thing like that, and Yvette was not surprised at all. I found this in the closet, I said. A quitclaim deed, already drawn up, transferring my house out of my name. All it needed was my signature and a quiet afternoon and a daughter-in-law or a son saying, just sign here, Mom. It's simpler this way. I want to know who drew it up, and I want the truth, because I already know more of it than you think. Theo, my Theo, did the bravest thing I have ever seen him do. He turned to his wife and her mother and he said, before either of them could spin it, I already told her I didn't know about it. Because I didn't, so that leaves the two of you. Sloan started to cry. Mom, she said to me, not to Yvette, and I noticed that. I noticed who she called Mom in the worst moment. I didn't draw it up. I swear I didn't. But I knew it existed. She said it was just smart planning, that everybody does it, that you'd want to, that it would just make everything easier when the time came. And I let her keep it in the house. I'm so sorry, I knew, and I said nothing. And then Yvette, because a person like Yvette cannot help herself, even cornered, especially cornered, lifted her chin and said, "And what exactly is the crime here?" Estate planning is not a crime. That house is going to these children eventually. I was simply moving things along. Somebody in this family has to think practically instead of getting sentimental over a, she gestured at the cake, over a pastry. The room went very still, and I said quietly, "You told my granddaughter I stopped loving her." That landed in the room like a dropped plate. Theo's jaw tightened, Sloane's head came up. Even Yvette went still, because some things, said out loud at a table, cannot be charmed away. "You sat in my kitchen," I said. "You drank my tea. And then you went upstairs and you told a 5-year-old that her gam was too busy for her, that I didn't want to see her anymore. A baby Yvette. You used a baby as a tool to pry me loose. That is the crime here, not the deed, though the deed is bad enough. The crime is that you have spent your whole life teaching the women around you that love is a performance and need is a weakness, and the only safe place is standing on top of somebody else. You taught it to your daughter so well that she nearly lost her marriage and her own heart to it, and I let you sit at my table and try to teach it to my grandchild over my dead body. I turned to Sloane then, and I gentled my voice, because she was not the architect of this, she was its longest-serving victim. You told me once, years ago, on a stool in my kitchen that I just fed people, that I didn't make them audition for it. Do you remember saying that?" She nodded, crying. "That girl was right," I said. "That girl knew something her mother spent 30 years trying to beat out of her. You don't make people audition for love. You just feed them, and you, Sloane, you never had to audition at my table. Not once. The cake was never a test. The house was never a prize. You were my daughter the day you married my son, and you are my daughter right now, even tonight, even after all of this. And the only thing I need from you is that you stop letting this woman tell you that being loved is something you have to win." Sloane got up out of her chair, and she came around the table, and she put her arms around me. This 36-year-old woman folding down into a 67-year-old grandmother, and she sobbed into my shoulder, and over the top of her head I looked at Yvette Renner. "Get your purse," I said. "You are not welcome at this table. You have never understood what a table is for," and she went. She gathered herself up and she said something about how we would all regret this, how I had turned her own daughter against her, and Sloane lifted her wet face from my shoulder and said the first words she had ever said to her mother that were truly her own. "No, Mom, you did that years ago. Roz is the one who's trying to undo it, and Yvette had no answer for that because there is no answer for the truth." And she left, and the door closed, and the house was quiet, and the cake sat in the center of the table, uncut. We cut it after. The four of us. Theo and Sloane and me and June came down in her pajamas because she heard voices, and I gave her the first slice, the biggest slice, with extra of the burnt honey she loves, and she climbed into my lap and said, "Gam, are you mad at me?" And I said, "No, baby, I have never once been mad at you. Somebody told you a lie, and I will always, always want to see you." And she nodded and ate her cake, and that of everything. That was the moment the cold thing in my chest finally melted all the way through. I will tell you how it ended, because endings matter. They did not stay upstairs. We talked about it, all of us, with the lawyer Gail, and we did it right this time, with paper that protected everybody instead of robbing somebody. They decided on their own that they needed their own roof, a place that was theirs and not built on top of mine. They found a small house on the other side of Hartsboro, and they pay for it themselves, the lights and the heat and all of it. And Sloane shut down the brand, the whole performance of it. And you know what she does now? She comes to my kitchen on Sunday mornings, not to film, not to borrow a recipe she'll claim as her own, just to bake beside me, the way she used to on that stool, with flour on her hands and nobody watching,
And last month, she sold a dozen real photos at the farmers under her own name, her own actual work. And she called me crying happy about it. And I have never been prouder of anybody. Theo keeps his eyes open now. It cost him to learn how, but he does it, and me. I am still here on the ground floor in the house that is still mine. I rented the upstairs unit finally to a quiet retired couple who bring me tomatoes from their garden. And I took the extra money and I did something I had been putting off for 67 years. I started teaching. A little class at the community center Saturday mornings, free for anybody who shows up. Mostly, it is young women who never had a mother in a kitchen, who never had anybody put a hand over theirs on the spatula and say, "Gentle, you're rushing it, gentle." There is one, Marley, 27, a single mother with a baby on her hip and a look in her eye I recognized the second I saw it, the look of somebody who thinks she has to earn every good thing twice. I am working on her. She is learning the burnt honey. She scorched 9 batches and got the 10th, just like I did. And when it came out right, she cried, and I held her, and I thought, this is the thing I am actually for. I am going to Italy in the fall, by myself. I have never in my life gone anywhere by myself, and I cannot wait. That is the whole story. I did not burn anything down. I did not hire lawyers to ruin anybody or stand up in a courtroom and unmask a villain. I just stopped. I stopped paying for a table I wasn't allowed to sit at. I stopped doing 1,000 invisible jobs nobody would name. I stopped making myself small enough to be loved, and I found out at 67 that I was never too big in the first place. I was just sitting at the wrong table, paying for the privilege. Let me leave you with the thing I have learned, and then I will let you go. People think the hardest thing a mother ever does is give. It isn't. The hardest thing is to stop giving to someone who only sees you when your hands are full. For 35 years, I fed this whole town, and somewhere along the way, I decided that being needed was the same as being loved. It isn't. Love asks how you're doing. Need only. I almost signed my own house away to prove I was worth keeping. And the woman who finally stopped me wasn't a lawyer or a judge. It was just me, kneeling on a closet floor, deciding that I had spent enough of my life setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. So if you've been waiting for permission to put your own name back on your guest list, this is it. You don't have to burn anything down. You just have to stop paying for the gas. Pull up a chair at your own table. It was always yours. It was always, always yours.